We are back at the Ralph Foster Museum at the beautiful campus of College of the Ozarks, and we hope you'll join us on Living Legacies of the Ozarks. Hello, and welcome to Living Legacies of the Ozarks. My name is Hayden Head, and it is my pleasure to welcome to the show Mike Brittain.
Thank you,
Thank
Dr.
you
Head. I
so
appreciate
much.
it.
Well, I appreciate your being here.
My honor.
Mike is the last of the cabin people. He grew up in the large town of Mildred, Missouri, sandwiched between Forsyth and Kirbyville. And in fact, he went to school in Kirbyville, Missouri. Mike is an entrepreneur in the truest sense of the word, in that he cares for everyone: his family, his community, his employees, and finally himself. Otherwise, as Mike says, an entrepreneur is just being greedy. He's been a log exporter. When he retired in 1997, Mike was the largest cedar log exporter in the world. He's also developed organic fertilizer, the most popular organic fertilizer in the country. He has a drying system for wood fiber, and he now makes drilling mud for oil exploration. So all of that is part of his entrepreneurial imagination and part of his business sense. Mike recently completed his real estate license, and he and his wife Linda celebrated 50 years of marriage in September. Mike, welcome to Living Legacy. So glad you're here.
Boy, I feel big now.
Well, it's fun. We're here at the Ralph Foster Museum. We've been here before, and at the College of the Ozarks. It is a wonderful place with all sorts of memorabilia and historical artifacts from the Ozarks and elsewhere. And this cabin that we're in should bring back some memories for you. Mm-hmm. And in fact, you have an actual relationship to this structure.
This particular cabin, I've been in when I was a child.
That's just amazing.
Yeah,
that's amazing.
It was amazing. And I knew the lady well that lived in this cabin. She was friends with my mother.
Really? Their last name was?
Bookout.
Bookout. Bookout.
Homer Bookout's mother.
And so Homer Bookout, when you remember, this cabin was still standing. How close to your own home?
Yeah. I was familiar with it in the 50s.
Okay.
Is how I knew it. But Homer Bookout was my school superintendent when I went to school at Kirbyville.
Wow. Yeah. Wow.
And
he didn't live in this cabin.
No, he didn't. His mother did.
She was still living.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Until she passed. She lived.
Let me ask you this: like this cabin, now obviously now we have electricity, we have lights more or less.
Yeah.
Right. So how does this compare to the cabin that you grew up in? Were you born in the cabin?
I was born in the cabin.
Okay.
A couple of things that are different. Our cabin was larger than this. I'm guessing this to be about a 12 by 14, and our cabin was 16 foot square.
That's quite a bit bigger
on the inside. Right. Yeah, right, smart, bigger.
So did it have more rooms?
There's only one room in a cabin.
Still only one room?
Yeah,
well, I didn't know if there were partitions or anything.
We had an upstairs with a bed in it.
Okay.
On each end.
So it must have been taller than this too.
Yes, it was.
Yeah, because you couldn't put a loft in something like this.
Well, it had more peak in the roof.
Got you.
Yeah, but it was wider, and of course.
So what was it like growing up in the Ozarks in the cabin?
You don't know any different. It's like growing up anywhere. And we had no water. But one big thing that's different between this cabin and the cabin I was in was this has a wooden floor.
You had a dirt floor?
My mother had a dirt floor. And she could mop and wax it.
Unbelievable.
She had tamped it and treated the dirt until it looked like tile. It was shiny.
That is, I've never heard that before.
That's true, yeah.
So it's like, but it's red clay, right? Red clay and limestone chunks?
No, I was born on a riverbank.
Okay, so it's more, it was black.
It was black dirt, yeah. I was born at Blackwell's Ferry where we crossed into Cedar Creek.
Now, where's Blackwell's Ferry?
It's Mildred.
In Mildred. So that must be on the White then.
On the White River.
On the White River.
Yeah, I was born on the White River. And I lived there until the Corps of Engineers took our property and filled our property full of Bull Shoals.
Bull Shoals, that's right. It'd be Bull Shoals down there. So Bull Shoals Dam was built earlier than Table Rock, wasn't it?
Yes.
Table Rock was the last of the big dams.
Yeah, it was the forerunner. Table Rock was finished in 58.
Right.
And Bull Shoals was before that, a couple of years.
Well, so I'm sure that, I get your point. You know what you know and what you're familiar with. So nobody knew any different. And your friends grew up in similar circumstances?
Oh, very similar, yeah. Yeah. I was isolated by living at the end of the road next to the river because there was nobody else there.
Oh, right.
And I was, for all practicality, I was an only child. I had one sibling 13 years older than I was. So I grew up kind of by myself, and there was no other children around. And it actually lent me the ability to do a lot of things children don't get to do.
Right.
Because I got to help my dad. I didn't spend all day with the neighbor kids playing and that kind of stuff, and it was beneficial to me. It was great.
So you're talking about the dam bull shoals going in. I'm sure that changed things more than we could imagine.
The absolute life, culture, future changer.
Really?
Oh, yeah. It changed the entire lifestyle of the community. The river was a lifeline for a lot of people. Yeah. And as I mentioned, I had told you once that my dad sold fish.
Right, I remember you saying that.
Yeah,
I think you said bootleg fish, which I'd never heard of bootlegging fish before.
But that all went away when the lake came.
Really? Uh-huh. Well, I mean, I can understand that.
Now we continued to bootleg fish, but we had to develop a whole new lifestyle, new system, new everything.
Did it affect where you lived? Did it affect your home?
Well, it took my home. They took our cabin.
Did they cover the cabin? Is that what happened?
Water never touched it.
It never touched it. But they still took the land as part of the take line.
The water never touched any of our property at all.
Wow.
But they took it anyway.
So how does
the saddest day in the world, it was the day that they came to my father's and he said, Mr. Brittain, we need to buy your place. And he said, no. He said, this place is my birthright. It was given to me by my father and it's not for sale. And he said, well, you don't understand, Mr. Brittain. We're going to buy your place whether you like it or not. And my dad turned to the county sheriff and said, Roy, is that right? And Roy said, yes, Hurley, I'm sorry. That's true. The saddest day in the world was the day that my father realized that he was going to lose his heaven that he lived on.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, but that affected thousands of people.
Thousands of people,
yeah,
right.
From all the way from Mountain Home, Arkansas to Branson was affected by Bull Shoals Lake. Everything from Branson to Bentonville was affected by Table Rock Lake.
That's
so
right.
Thousands of people were uprooted and their whole lifestyle changed.
I tell you, the photographs of building that thing are amazing.
It's incredible, isn't it?
It is.
All handwork.
All handwork.
You know, I'll share this with you.
Yeah.
My grandfather worked on that dam.
Really?
Uh-huh. And he told me that each man had 6 teams of horses. And they stood on a tower and they worked those horses by voice command, excavating that dirt with big giant slips. They called them Fresnos. And those horses pulled those Fresnos and pulled all that material out of that hole for the pothole. And each man had 6 teams of horses that answered to their own name.
That's an amazing story.
That's engineering right there.
Living Legacies of the Ozarks is sponsored by Ozark Mountain Legacy.
I'm really interested, and I hope you're okay with talking about your log exporting, about other things that you've done, but also about hillbillies. And as we talk about this, I want us to at least take a look at the difference between the stereotypical hillbilly, or the caricature, and the authentic hillbilly. Great, thank you.
I wanted to address that. Great. You know, the stereotype hillbilly is the guy on the front porch with dirty overalls and a wore-out hat and a corncob pipe, and the holes in his shoes. You know, poverty-ridden. Well, the stereotype may be accurate in visual appearance, but you'll never know what that guy's worth. And you have to understand, why would people move here?
Right, and that's a real question.
Well, that fits into the stereotype. So I'll address my family because I'm familiar with my family's past. My grandfather's family came from Castle Rock, Missouri, up on the Mississippi above St. Louis.
Okay.
Black dirt. Mm-hmm. My mother's family came from Lebanon, Illinois. You could bury a church with a shovel in black dirt.
Right.
So why in the world would they move here to these rocks and trees and hills and hillsides?
Hardscrabble, right? I mean,
yeah. Well, that's what you assume. It's hardscrabble.
Right.
But consider this: what did they not have in northern Missouri, and what did they not have in Illinois? 2 things that were essential for life: fuel and water.
And they had those in abundance here.
Water runs out of the top of the ground here.
It does.
And we got fuel unending. We've got forest everywhere.
Right.
And meat. Right. All of the game that we had here was unending. All you had to do to be successful here was raise a garden.
Right.
And they were so independent and so well off.
Yeah,
right?
Because
they wanted for nothing.
Right.
that they sat on the porch and let you think whatever you wanted to.
They didn't care.
They didn't care what you
Whatever
thought.
your opinion
Of course
is.
not. Yeah. And they probably wore holes in their shoes because it was just unhandy to get a pair of shoes.
Right.
There wasn't any stores closed.
Right.
And they wouldn't go anywhere anyway. Life was good to them. They were in full retirement.
That's such a different way of being in the world than
Yeah.
any of us are experiencing now.
Yeah.
Hang on one second, because I'm enjoying the stories. I want some more, and we hope that you'll be joining us again right here on Living Legacies when we come back.
Living Legacies of the Ozarks is sponsored by Ozark Mountain Legacy.
Welcome back to Living Legacies of the Ozarks. I want to welcome again Mike Brittain, who's joined us today to talk about life in the hills and its authenticity and the way that these hills started. And I've got other questions for Mike. And Mike, I hope you're up for them.
Oh, yeah.
Here we go.
This is lots more fun than I expected.
well, I've enjoyed it too. And I tell you, it's Living Legacies, right? I mean, clearly we're concerned about what's gone before, what we're going to preserve, what we're going to carry forward, because we know that places like this now are largely preserved in museums. And thank goodness that they are preserved in museums. Otherwise,
thanks for adding that. Boy, this is great to get to sit in here.
It is great. It's very generous of them to let us be here.
And I mentioned I could smell ham and beans in here.
That's right. If they just had more than an electric fire underneath that pot.
We can fix that.
Yeah, that's right. Of course, we'd probably burn the museum down. But anyhow, but I mean, there's also part of the Ozarks that we never want to lose, right? And I think that you're getting at that now. When you're talking about people coming here, I mean, it's practical, for one thing. You have water, you have game, you have fuel, you have a good life.
Oh, it's a wonderful life.
But not in a way that we would understand.
Well, you don't
now.
understand it because if you get away from here, it's all hither-tether. We're late planting our corn, we're late getting our plowing done, we got to do this, we got to do that, and they're just in rush, and they don't get a chance to enjoy life. Those hillbillies, they killed a deer this morning and they're going to rest today and possum hunt tonight. You get 35 cents for possum hide, back then.
Yeah.
I personally have hunted for fur and trapped in my lifetime. I remember when a coon hide was $40. Well, I couldn't afford to go cut logs when I could make $40 to $80 a night, kill one or two coons a night.
Man, that's amazing. When did you start doing the When did you start doing the log export business?
And I shipped my first load of logs, I think, in 1981 or
1981.
It was 1982.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yeah.
To Korea.
Well, I shipped my first load to Korea,
Okay.
but I shipped logs to Korea, Japan, Thailand, Belgium, France, and England.
How in the world did you do that? How do you make connections to ship logs from the middle of the United States all over the world?
Well, the Department of Agriculture come up with a new idea called trade leads. And what they would do, they printed out every wanted to buy item from all over the United States. So there would be, you had to poll their, they used to have these things called fax machines.
Oh yeah, I've heard of those.
And you could poll a fax machine. You could dial a certain number and command it in a certain way to send you information. So once a week, I got a trade leads presentation from the Washington that showed wanted to buy ads from all over the world. And they had everything. I mean, everything. Corn. Corn was a big item, but fur and wood. And I remember one ad wanted to buy tropical fish.
Really?
Mm-hmm. Or they might want to buy consumable fish, potable fish.
But not bootleg fish.
No, well, I guess you could if you sent them the wrong variety.
Right. So you found out that Korea cedar or something.
I had written letters all over the world to people. I had help me out here. There's a big set of green books that has all the information in the world in them, and I can't.
Like the encyclopedia.
It's almost
something like that.
Yeah, it's a commercial encyclopedia.
Oh, okay. I probably don't know the name.
Yeah,
right.
My memory's been affected with heart surgery. Yeah. But anyway, I had found a contact information in Korea, and at that time you had to write a letter. So you shipped the letter, took 2 weeks, and 2 weeks they'd respond, and 2 weeks you get it back. So you had a 6-week turnaround on all that. But I finally got a hit on this Korean guy. He said, well, I never heard of this wood that you sell. I don't have a clue what it is, but I'm interested. So I went to all the trouble to make an international phone call, and I had it set up with him to have an interpreter, so I called him. And here's the deal that we made. He said, I've never seen this wood. I don't have a clue what it is. You're welcome to send it to me. If I can use it, I will pay your price. If I can't use it, you can come and get it, or we'll pay somebody to burn it.
Okay.
And I took that risk. And I shipped him 2 container loads. I mortgaged everything I had. Mortgaged the house.
To ship these 2 loads of cedar logs.
To ship these 2 loads. And I loaded them by hand. I cut the logs by hand, skidded them out with horses, and I loaded those logs in those containers by hand. It took 2 days to load 2 containers.
And so then they go onto a train, presumably.
Then we go onto a train. Then they go to the coast, get on a ship, and he got the product, and he called me and he said, I got your logs and I love them.
Wow.
I'll take more.
Wow.
And I said, really? And he said, yeah, I'll take 2 loads a week. And I said, I can't send you a load a month. I said, I cut these logs by hand. I don't have any equipment or anything. Until I make enough money to buy equipment, I'll have to do it by hand. And he said, well, if that's the case, I'll just take whatever you can send. And that started it all. I took that risk, and I hit, and it hit good. And the rollers started whirling, and we landed on All Stars.
That is great.
Yeah, and it worked. And when I retired in '97, I was averaging 12 loads a week.
That is amazing. And a load being?
A container.
A container load.
Yeah, container.
Wow.
Load. A little more than a semi-load. 22 metric tons.
22 metric tons.
Yeah.
That's an amazing story. Let's take a quick break.
Sure.
I want to talk about chicken manure.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
And we hope you'll join us to talk about chicken manure when we come back on Living Legacies.
Yeah, it smells like money.
You got to leave that in.
Living Legacies of the Ozarks is sponsored by Ozark Mountain Legacy.
Welcome back to Living Legacies of the Ozarks. I'm talking to Mike Brittain about chicken manure. Mike, remind me of that story, because this followed the story about the wood pellets, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, when I helped my friend get in the mulch business, I did a lot of trade shows that were involved with horticulture. And there was a gentleman in Bentonville, Arkansas, that had a turkey farm. And he was working on the possibility of turning turkey manure into organic fertilizer. But it was so hot that you had to be careful how you applied it. You'd burn all your plants up. There's a lot of nitrogen in that. So, and I would let him go to trade shows with me and display some of his fertilizer, and we got to be kind of buddies, and then he passed away. And I had a friend that went to work for S&R Egg Company in Wisconsin, and they had a problem with hen waste. They derived 2 million pounds of hen waste daily. And
That's a lot of hen waste.
And they'd given all of it away, and they were paying people to haul it to get it out of there. Well, 2 million pounds a day adds up pretty quick.
Yeah.
And they were looking for some way to relieve that problem. And my friend said, I know a guy that's kind of creative, that he's worked with some poultry fertilizer, I know, and he said he could probably help you. So they called me and asked me if I would work as a consultant to go talk to them. And so I asked my friend, are they good people? And he said, the finest Christian people in the world. And I said, well, I won't charge them nothing. If I can help, I will, because I'm not doing anything else. If they'll pay my expenses, I'll come to Wisconsin. So they did, and we went into a big conference room, and about 15 people sat down in one of those beautiful leather chairs, big burl table. Boy, I was impressed. The wood in that table was worth $10,000. But anyway, they asked me all kinds of questions, and I answered as best I could. And they asked me, how would you market this? And I told them what I thought. And they thanked me and offered to pay me. And I said, no, I'm good. I'm just glad to help. And I said, this will help a lot of people. And And about 3 or 4 days later, they called me back. And the owner of the company called me this time, and he said, man, we need you to come back one more trip and ask you some more questions, if you would. And he said, Mike, we got money. We're not opposed to it. We pay $150 an hour consulting fee, and I would feel better if you'd take that. And I said, well, if you insist, I will, but I want you to know. And he said, well, this time I'm asking you, and I'm paying you. And I said, okay. So I went back. They paid my expenses. And this time we walked in the conference room, and it was me and 2 other guys. And I thought that was a little strange. So we sat down, and the lady brought drinks, and finally the owner of the company says, now let me tell you why you're here. He said, you made an impression on us when you were here the other day, and we think we need you on our team. What would it take to get you to come to work for us? And so God's wonderful, isn't he, though? And he said, what would you have to have? And I said, well, the last job I had, I sold the whole company, and I had about $10,000 or $15,000 in the pipeline of my expenses where I was on commission only. And I said, I had no way to recoup that. And I said, so the next time I go to work for anybody, there's going to be a credit card. And he held one up, and he said, kind of like this one? And it had my name on it. And I said, yeah, kind of like that. He said, and how much would you want to go to work for us? And I didn't know what salary was. I don't know anything about salary. But I had a daughter that was a teacher and a son-in-law that was a professor, and I knew what they made. So I took my daughter and son-in-law's salary and put it together and just shot him. I thought we'd negotiate from there, and shot him that. He said, you're not going to believe this, but that's to the dollar what we talked about this morning. And he had it on his notebook. And I thought, God, can this be true? A credit card, all expenses paid, and a salary like this? I just couldn't believe it. It was one of those salaries that, at that time, 6-figure salary was just all but unheard of. And this was a very nice 6-figure salary. Yeah.
Nice.
And so we continued on. He said, well, one more question. How much commission do you want? And my heart almost stopped. And I said, well, without even thinking, I said, how about 5%? He said, look here. That's what we had in mind.
Wow.
So I went to work for them.
Yeah.
And we developed that. We spent $3 million and built a big plant, and we figured out how to take one of the nitrate molecules away from the hen waste so it wouldn't burn the plants.
Gotcha.
And it was a fixed nitrogen. Oxygen wouldn't carry that nitrogen away.
Gotcha.
This nitrogen was only active when the microbes of the soil chewed it up where the plants could eat it. So it was a time-release fertilizer.
Wow.
And it was called Chick Magic. And it was the most popular organic fertilizer in the U.S. and Canada. We had accidentally found the pearl, and it was wonderful. It really was wonderful. Well, guess who come calling? Scott's Chemical, and said, we need this. We want a new organic line for our Miracle Grow, and you've got it. So I sold Scott's Chemical the rights to buy our fertilizer.
Is there any way to, for lack of a better word, to like square the knot? Is there any way to put, say, your childhood, the way you grew up, you know, your life? Because I don't think people understand the benefit, the advantages, the gift of living in the hills. Do you see what I'm asking?
I'm going to give you.
Put this together?
I started to tell you a while ago. My greatest gift was when my dad told me, "There's a very good chance you'll be successful, and I want you to remember this: don't be afraid to try, because it don't get any worse than this." You remember this. You have absolutely nothing to lose. Give it all you got, kid.
Hey, thank you so much for joining me today. Enjoy visiting
let's
with
do it
you.
again.
Let's do it again.
I'm full of stories. We didn't get to biochar and some of the more interesting things that we've done.
Oh, well.
Yeah, I get
We've
it.
covered some ground,
Yeah.
but thank you so much. And thank you so much for joining us here at Living Legacies of the Ozarks. We hope you have a great day.
Nice meeting you.
Living Legacies of the Ozarks is sponsored by Ozark Mountain Legacy,